Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, a Texas government affairs consultancy, the Alice KLEBERG Reynolds Foundation, Claire and Carl Stewart, and by Entergy.
I'm Evan Smith. He formed his first band, the legendary punk rock group Husker Du, all the way back in 1979. And 40 years later, he's still making noisy, amazing music. His latest release, his 12th as a solo artist, is Sunshine Rock. He's Bob Mould. This is Overheard.
Let's be honest. Is this about the ability to learn, or is this about the experience of not having been taught properly? How have you avoided what has befallen other nations in Africa? And you could say that he made his own bed, but you caused him to sleep in it. You know, you saw a problem and over time took it on. And let's start with the sizzle before we get to the steak. Are you going to run for president? I think I just got an F from you, actually. This is over.
Bob Mould, welcome.
Thanks, good to be here,
Good
Evan.
to see you, and congratulations on the record.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
The nicest thing I can say to you, and I do mean it in the nicest way, is it sounds like you. You know, a lot of these records, when somebody has been in a band long ago, we have a memory of that band, and then they go off on their own and they do a solo career. 40 years later, it sometimes sounds like a weak tea version of themselves.
Yeah.
This record is Red Bull.
It's pretty strong stuff.
This is energy, it's excitement.
It is.
It's noisy.
It is. It's good. Yeah. It's noisy. It's poignant. It's mature without being old. It's trying to keep a good balance of all the things. Remembering where I started and sort of knowing where I am now. Right. It's always a balancing act.
That consciousness of remembering where you started has really been a through line for everything you've done for these last 40 years, right? I can't think of any record, and I've listened to every record you've put out over all these years. I can't think of any record, honestly, that didn't sound like you. I guess we're all so cynical about the way this typically goes that we think eventually he's going to make a clunker. He's going to shank one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had moments where I think I've challenged my audience a little more than I normally would. But I think at this point, getting 40 years into it, it's the kind of thing where those decades of challenge and the decades of experimentation, and when you get to a point, you're like, I think it's okay to give the people what they want at least some of the time. Right.
So what about this record is, I mean, I know what I think is similar, that it sounds a lot like records you've done in the past, and it sounds like you personally. What's different about it?
Well,
what's differentiated?
I think the main differences to me would be, for me, environment is always key to writing a record. And the past few years, I've been spending time between San Francisco and Berlin, Germany.
And this record was recorded?
It was recorded in San Francisco, but a lot of it was written in Berlin. Right. I think another striking difference to me is the inclusion of an 18-piece string orchestra. This is the first time that I've done full orchestration for cellos, violas, violins. They're technical things, approaching the vocals from a much more raw and visceral angle, as opposed to stacking things very precisely as pop music usually is these days. Right. But underneath it, at the core, it's those dense guitar chords. These heavy clouds of chords that hang over you. Yeah. And I think maybe for Sunshine Rock, a lot of people thought I was being ironic with this title.
But no, it's actually a kind of upbeat. I mean, in its own way, what passes for upbeat with you?
Yeah, it's upbeat as it gets.
It's not Black Sheets of Rain. I mean, right?
It's about the opposite.
About the exact inverse of that. I think the word sun, or some variation on the word sun, all throughout this record, it appears so many times that I thought he's punking us.
No. This was a conscious effort. It's almost. This decade has been very interesting for me. It's been sort of a best of times, worst of times. Yep. Professionally, a lot of success and acclaim, and people visiting my work and celebrating the work, and then losing both of my parents right during the writing process of the 2 albums prior to this. Right. So to me, it's almost like when people need to lose a few pounds, or they need to stop some kind of behavior, and you start putting Post-it notes everywhere. Right. Think happy, be better, think about the sunshine.
The clouds part eventually.
Yeah, and then with this record, Sunshine Rock was sort of the tent pole for the album. It came to me in the summer of '17. And then when I saw that brightness, I was like, okay, this is where it really starts.
This is the frame.
Then I write forward from that.
What do you call this? I struggle with what to call you, how to characterize or catalog you. Are you a rock and roll musician? Are you a punk rock musician? Are you an alternative rock musician? These labels are ultimately meaningless, but I'm just wondering how you think about your own work. How do you put it in what bucket?
I think of the 5-year-old kid who sat in a room in a house that was loud and violent.
Malone, New York.
Malone, New York, and sat and put on these 7-inch pieces of plastic that I got from my dad, and I would see these labels go around, and I would memorize this label copy.
Right.
And that's where music started for me. So I think I'm a deeply entrenched late 20th century popular music.
It's music. It's not one kind or another kind. It's just simply music.
It's music to me. It's pop music.
Right. Was there something that you were trying beyond the idea that the clouds are parting and you know and all that we talked about, which I think is all legitimate and it's a good frame for this? Was there something you're trying to accomplish with a record like this, and did you accomplish it? I'm asking really because so many artists create art that is imperfect because we're all imperfect. And it's hard to really be honest with yourself about what you liked about it and what you didn't. I'm going to ask you to say what you thought you accomplished and didn't accomplish.
I would give myself about a 97% score on this one.
That's an A+ in high school. I remember that's a good grade.
It's an A+ everywhere. And I think, you know, to me, I guess you strive to make the perfect record. You strive to make this 40-minute singular statement that will change your world as the writer. It will change the world of everyone you touch, all the listeners you touch.
Yeah.
But after you finish the record and about 3 weeks later and you go back and you revisit and you're like, oh no, I didn't do it.
Right.
I didn't do it.
This has happened to you?
It happens every time.
Every time.
So that's what keeps us going.
Right. I want to improve on that the next time.
Yeah, you got to get it right sooner or later.
Are you making a record like this for yourself or for us? So is the judgment finally, are the metrics for success ultimately back on us to decide whether we like it, how we interpret it, or is it all about how you are self-critical, how you're judging this work, and how if you had it to do over, you would do it differently?
On a technical level, you know, I write from within. You know, I observe, it goes in. I have my rain bucket, I run around, I catch everything that falls out of the sky, and I have this water, and sometimes I paddle it, sometimes I swim in it, sometimes I cook with it, but, you know, at the end of the day, I'm like, what did I do? Yeah. You know, so the process is really, you know, it's you try to be as unconscious as possible. And
this hasn't changed over the years, how you process the work that you do?
No, it's a little tougher these days because typically after you do the rainwater and whatever you do with it, and then the next morning you wake up and you hope it's in your head. Yeah. And if it's in your head, it's a good one. If you forgot it in your sleep, start over.
But also I think the feedback loop also is different today than it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago, right? Yeah. There's almost instant feedback. It comes across all kinds of channels, all kinds of platforms. People get access to your stuff quicker, right? And you almost know immediately whether this is going to work or not.
I have no idea. I don't look.
You don't look?
No.
Well, that's probably a smart thing.
No, I'm pretty old-fashioned like that. I'm pretty much a covered wagon kind of guy. It's done. Yeah.
And then I'm on to the next.
Yeah, you know, I mean, social media is an amazing thing. I try to stay, you know, true to my work. And I mean, I see it when I go on the road and people come and they tell me the stories of what my stories mean to them. Right. And that's the feedback loop
that's
I'm
more
looking
meaningful
for.
To you.
More meaningful. I mean, anybody can jump on a computer and say anything. Right. But when people actually take the time out of their busy lives to show up, make a commitment, make an investment, stay around afterwards just to say, this means the world to me.
Right. Now, this is the 12th, by my count, hope this is right, the 12th record you made as a solo artist. First solo record was Workbook, 1989, 30 years ago.
Yes.
I was contemplating that today, going Workbook was 30 years ago.
I know.
There are grown-ups, productive members of our society who were not alive when Husker Du was a band.
There are a lot of people at my management office who
have no idea.
Who were not born.
You know,
was making my first solo album.
The joke is like, you know, there are young people all over this country who think that Paul McCartney's first band was Wings.
That's great.
Right? There are people who think that your first band was Sugar.
Yes.
Right? Who have no idea that this thing preceded it.
Yeah.
And then that was about 3 years within the 30 years that you've been making solo records. So much has changed in that time. I was thinking about that. So you go back to when you made Workbook to now when you make Sunshine Rock. The economics of the music business have changed.
Completely.
The distribution of music has changed,
Absolutely.
the technology behind making music has changed, and the fan base has completely overturned and overturned and overturned. Reflect on that. What's different to you?
Well, gosh, going back just, artistically, 1988, when I was writing Workbook, I was living by myself on a farm on 10 acres in northern Minnesota.
Yeah.
I had a satellite dish.
That was your connection to the outside world.
There was no
right?
internet. There were no cell phones. There
Right.
was nothing.
Yeah.
And that was, I barely had that. I had that and 24 chickens, that laid eggs in the morning, or at the night, or whenever, but
Right.
they show up in the morning.
Yeah. But you could really be off the grid.
Yeah, record companies was the days of excess. We were 3 years into the CD, which for record companies was a salvation because they could take things that cost $8 to you before, repackage them as 15. You all bought them again,
Right.
but we saw none of that because it was an experimental format. So we had to take a cut for that. Moved through the 90s, and then the internet starts showing up. People, call out research from radio stations. Fans are getting a little more detached. They're finding other media that's interesting. Late 90s, file sharing is full tilt.
Right.
Music business lost the plot.
Everything wants to be free.
Everything needs to be free.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Were you on board? Let me stop you. Were you on board with that? There are some people I'll talk to who say, free is great because all free is doing is creating new fans. And ultimately, even if they get it for free, they'll pay eventually. It's a little bit like the drug dealer who gives you a taste and gets you hooked and then makes you pay,
idea.
right?
That's the
but
idea.
then there are people who say not only no, hell no to the idea of free because this is ultimately my intellectual property, this is my creative efforts, and anybody who is giving it away and I'm not seeing income from it, that's completely wrong. Where did you come down on that continuum?
I think there's a balance. I tend to think that if something is free, that's about how much value gets assigned to it.
So it gets devalued by being
free?
Yeah.
I think so.
Right.
I think when there was a time years ago when I was very upset about music when people were downloading things and I'm going, now it's an icon on the desktop that you can just throw into the trash and you click a button and it disappears.
Right.
What kind of investment did you really make?
You felt that way about the Napster era of everything wants to be free. Do you feel that way about the Spotify era today?
More so, yeah.
More so?
More so.
All right, talk about that, because I want to push back in a second after you explain why.
Well, I understand the idea of convenience. I understand the idea of curation. I DJ'd for many years, and I used to buy a lot of music and spend a lot of time putting songs together in a sequence that would tell a story to people who were dancing in front of me. So I understand the value of curation. I'm not clear on how companies can offer an a la carte, all you can eat. You're not sure what you're eating, but you're eating it because you told it that you like chicken. So it finds all iterations of chicken, bundles it, and gives it to you. In return, they collect all of your data, which they do not share with us.
Right.
And, given the choice, the music business was here, and then it went here, and sometimes I think it's here. Given the choice, I'd rather get the Motown car.
I'll acknowledge the awfulness of so much of what you just described, but it's awfulness and I get to listen to the Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, to my mind, what's interesting about those free services is the idea of discovery or rediscovery. Bands I might have missed, things I might not have listened to for years and years, and all of a sudden now I'm digging on listening to all of the Allman Brothers catalog because Spotify makes it possible in the moment to do that.
Yeah, of course. I think for discovery it's good, and I think as media becomes so fractured and everybody now basically can be their own cable channel.
Correct.
That it's curation is more important. I think real life curation is really good. I tend to still like real life radio stations who have people and personalities.
Human beings.
Who are connected to the community that they serve, and they talk about musicians that are coming to the town and how it interfaces with people's existences. Yeah. When it's being done by a machine because you told it you like chicken, well, I don't know what kind of chicken you're getting, but I hope you like it.
Right. It's too bad.
I get it. I'm an old guy and I've got very ancient ways, these mysterious ancient ideas of how this should be done.
Isn't it funny to be, you're 58, right?
Yes.
Isn't it funny to be 58 and to think of yourself as on the other side of the mountain at this point as this stuff goes?
And then when I go out and I do shows and I sort of look over on side stage and I see all the younger musicians going, how does he do this?
Right.
I think I'm okay.
How do you do it? This is a 52-year-old asking a 58-year-old. Don't you get tired of this?
I don't get tired of this. I get tired.
Period.
Yeah, I get tired early. I wake up early. I go to bed early.
It hasn't gotten to be less fun being out on the road, promoting a record, playing the stuff you love. I mean, obviously you love what you're doing.
Everything goes to that 90 minutes.
Right.
All of the rest.
Leave it on the field.
The other 22 and a half hours of the day, you just go through it.
Right.
You look out the windshield for 6 hours.
Yep.
You sit in a cold room for 5 hours, waiting to do that 90 minutes. Then you go out and you talk to people, and then you hope that they did not give your room away at the hotel because you didn't get time to check in.
Right.
And then you wake up and you do it again. All of those parts were amazing when I was basically homeless.
Yeah.
But now that I have a home and I have people in my life that I care about and I want to take care of and I want them to take care of me,
yeah.
those 22 and a half hours get way more important.
Right.
But that hour and a half.
But the 90 minutes makes the mundane stuff worth it.
Everything goes to that.
Right. I want to come back to these solo records. So 12 solo records over the years. I am, as I said, partial to Workbook. Workbook was one of those records that changed my life. Black Sheets of Rain changed my life. You must have favorites. You know, you love all your children equally, but you love some more equally than others. You know how that goes.
There's some that have accomplished more than others.
What's the best solo record you've made? Don't say Sunshine Rock.
Don't say Sunshine Rock.
No.
I think Workbook was incredibly important because, you know, in the wake of Husker Du, what was I supposed to do?
Right.
Should I just continue what was so successful, or do I relearn this music thing completely?
Yeah.
So I spent a year and a half relearning how to play guitar, how to tell stories, how to write songs.
And also playing with different people.
Yeah, playing with different people and having to adjust to that and learning from them.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really neat record. I thought in 2012, Silver Age was a really nice return to form. It was my first record for Merge. It was funny because I started working with Merge Records ostensibly for the 20th anniversary reissues of Sugar, Copper, Blue.
Yeah.
And then I said, oh, hey, by the way, I'm still writing. You know,
would you like to
want to take a chance?
Yeah.
You know, so it was great. So
Yeah.
you know, they sort of came for nostalgia and
Right. Do you ever
left with the future.
You ever put your own records on at home? You ever listen to those records?
No.
No.
No. I mean, if I have to check a lyric, you know,
But that's it.
Yeah, that's all.
You can't. You can't.
I've always tried to be as forward-looking as possible.
Smart. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to drag you back for
That's
a second.
cool.
So,
That's what I'm here for.
all right. So you mentioned Malone, New York, was where you
Yes.
grew up. That is up at the tippy top of New York State. Up at the.
Yeah, it's between Montreal and Lake Placid.
I mean, literally up there.
It's up there.
So you spent your years as a kid growing up there, and then went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yep.
And the story, as I recall it, is you walk into a Cheapo Records.
Yes.
And you meet a guy named Grant Hart.
Yes. Yeah, I was.
And then music changes forever.
Yeah, everything changed. The whole world changed. Yeah, I was a smart kid. They tried to skip me ahead in school. My parents did not let them.
Yeah.
So I got out when I was 17. I was very fortunate to get an underprivileged scholarship from McAllister College, where
small liberal arts college.
Mondale, Kofi Annan.
Right.
So it's yeah, and you know, got a fake ID immediately and started going to punk rock shows the first weekend.
Like every red-blooded American kid.
Exactly. Yeah. And then as you mentioned, there was a record store near McAllister College. And walked in, and there was this crazy-looking barefoot hippie playing. Maybe I think it might have been modern dance, Perubu or something like that. You know, something equally esoteric, and had half a PA set up out in front of the shop. And I just walked in and we sort of talked. Said, "You like that? I like that. You like that? You like that? Do you play? You play? You don't play guitar." I said, "Yeah, come watch. I play guitar." And off we went.
So Landspeed Record was, a band comes together in 79.
Yep.
Landspeed Record comes out in 81. That's the first record.
Yep.
And then everything falls apart. And then, to what I remember, because I got into college in 83, college like McAllister College, small liberal arts college in the middle of nowhere. What I had at that point beyond snow was records.
Yes.
And so Zen Arcade, New Day Rising, Flip Your Wig, like in 83 to 85, completely, I'm a different person because of those records. And I think a lot of people felt like that piece of Husker Du's catalog was amazing. Did you all know at the time how influential it would be to the rest of us? Did you know what you were doing in the moment?
No.
No
I
idea.
mean, I think we were trying to change everything. You know, to sort of set the stage, it was fall of '83 when we recorded Zen Arcade out in Redondo Beach, California, in 2 20-hour sessions. Everything was first.
Marathon sessions.
Everything was first take.
Wow, how great is that?
You know, we were with a label called SST Records. They were running, they didn't have enough money to press the records to get it out in June. It waited until September of '84. We had already been touring. We had already written and basically recorded what would become New Day Rising in January of '85.
Right.
By the time we were on the road in January of '85 promoting New Day Rising, we had already written Flip Your Wig. It was the kind of band where we were always touring, always writing, always recording. We
a couple
were
different things going.
We were always at least an album ahead of ourselves. And that period of time, Zen Arcade and New Day Rising and Flip Your Wig, that was a double album and 2 single albums in 13 months. So
amazing.
So that did sort of change things.
Prolific.
Yes.
You know, the thing that I remember weirdly of all the things during that period, and there's so much good music on those records, and I still will occasionally put on Celebrated Summer to remind myself of that period of time, is the cover of the Mary Tyler Moore theme that was the flip side of the single of Makes No Sense at All. And when she died, I saw you talk about how meaningful it was for you all to record that song.
Yeah, I mean, people came to me, there was
just
some press.
Bizarre.
Press were coming and asking, and they were sort of like, so was that tongue-in-cheek and all that at the time? I'm like, we're from Minnesota. The show was in Minnesota. No, this is really,
And that original song, I think, it wasn't Sonny Curtis. Sonny Curtis was involved.
I Fought the Law and Love Is All Around, and many others.
What a strange thing.
Yeah.
What happened to Husker Du? Bands break up. I mean, you know, the oldest American story in some ways is band comes together, band has success, bandmates become the closest of friends and then the most mortal of enemies. Band breaks up, and then there's all this kind of, you know, discussion for many, many years after what exactly happened, who was to blame, you know, was it John's fault, was it Paul's fault, right? You always have that conversation.
Were there other people? Yeah.
Right. What happened?
Well, when you said, did we know what we were doing, and I said no. After that prolific spell, when you have somebody call up and go, hey, the Village Voice just put 2 of your albums in the top 10. Had it only been 1, you would have been the best, above Springsteen and Madonna and Prince and everybody. So then you know everybody's watching. And then the stakes are higher, everything changes, and you never see that coming because you were living in a van a year before that. The band went to Warner Brothers, and I think a lot of different things happened at the same time, about 18 months before the band broke up. Greg Norton, the bass player, moved from the Twin Cities down to Red Wing to start a family and start a business. I was a bad alcoholic from the age of 13 until 25, and I just quit cold turkey one day. I think Grant had other things he wanted to experiment and explore in his own work and in his life. So it was just it was the classic case of you're really successful and now you're all growing apart. All at the same time.
And growing older and doing things that people who grow older do. So, you know, we kept at it for 18 more months. It was a tough time, and by the end of it, everybody just knew that
like,
it was time
Uncle, we're done. We're done and don't.
So Greg Norton went off and continued to play music in various bands over the years.
I think everybody continued. Grant went on to start a group called Nova Mob. Did solo
Nova Mob is a great band.
Great band. I mean, so I think, you know, I think the beauty of it, and when you talk about and people say things and who caused this and what happens, one of the wonderful things that we still have in the music business is the mythology. You know, so much of it, you know, when I grew up was like, does Alice Cooper really do this? Do these people really hate each other? You know, and it's like, as musicians, you always keep that, well, you never know. And writers always, you know, expound for centuries on things, and fans believe stories, and who am I to contradict any of that, really?
Grant passed about 18 months ago?
September of 17.
September of 17. And you all were sort of in touch toward the end?
We were in touch, you know, on and off through the entire time, but for the last 5 years, you know, more so in touch. There was talk of doing some reissues, and eventually we all came to consensus on a large box set that showed everybody the early years, you know, the baby band, when we're emulating our favorites instead of changing the world. And, you know, through the process of that, the 3 band members and an attorney in Minnesota who was acting as the, you know, lawyer, manager, everything, you know, the 4 of us worked together for 4 years to put this box, you know, out for the world to enjoy.
So to the degree that it's a happy enough ending, even at the end.
There was closure and good times.
Do you look back on the Husker Du? We have 2 minutes. You look back on the Husker Du years as happy, no regrets, everything was great.
It's amazing first band, amazing what it did. I think what it did for music, what it may have done to music, I think we were one of hundreds of bands that did that kind of, hardcore punk, underground, sharing information, making food and housing bands that came to your town to play for $50. It could have been any of the bands. We were very, very lucky, like Minutemen and Minor Threat, Naked Ray Gun, all the, DOA, all the bands, we all shared what little we had.
Yeah.
And
what an amazing
really,
time.
Really incredible.
So when
time.
people come up to you when you're going out to play on tour, as you will now for many months with Sunshine Rock, and they say, play Celebrated Summer or play some of the Husker Du stuff, do you feel I always wondered, like, Elvis Costello, all these years later, people still yell Allison at him in concert, and he may or may not like it. He probably doesn't like it. You have any problem with that if people want you to go backwards as opposed to forwards?
I don't know how to play Freebird, but if I wrote it, I'm glad to take a stab at it.
Seriously, that's it. Okay, go. So the takeaway from this interview is ask Bob Mould to play Freebird.
Yeah, if you want to get under my skin, I have just shown you.
What song is it that you want to hear? That's it. It's an honor to get to sit across from you.
Evan,
there's no other way to say it. And I wish you great success with this record and keep making records. It's so fun to talk to you.
Love the show. Thank you.
Great. Bob Mould, thanks very much. Take care. Good.
We'd love to have you join us in the studio. Visit our website at klru.org/overheard to find invitations to interviews, Q&As with our audience and guests, and an archive of past episodes.
I split my time between San Francisco, which is incredibly free range, and Berlin, which is a little more walk on the right side all the time kind of place.
Yeah, right.
It's been really enlightening, to see, how they've taken democracy that we showed them and how they've moved forward with it.
Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, a Texas government affairs consultancy, the Alice KLEBERG Reynolds Foundation, Claire and Carl Stewart, and by Entergy,